What appears to be acceptable in one place, but could actually be damaging in another. Relationships are a lot like a garden. You want to sow and plant good things. You want to tend them and take care of them because they'll produce wonderful produce for you. But if you're not careful and if you get passive, then the weeds will come. And if you don't weed out your garden, if you don't take out those things in your relationship that want to choke the life out of your relationship, it'll not only take over, but it'll destroy your relationships. Are you mindful that you need to weed regularly? And what do you weed out? What do you say is no longer allowed to be here? Do you have guidelines in your own home, in your own heart? Do you have guidelines in your own relationships about what you allow and what you don't allow? Because that's the tricky thing about a weed. Corn stalk with 6 ears of corn can be a good thing, unless it's in a flower garden. That's a weed. So you got to understand what a weed is, and you got to understand what you need to weed out. So let's look at a definition of weed. Weed's a plant that's not valued where it's growing and is usually of vigorous growth. Usually of vigorous growth. That's the definition of a weed. The definition actually continues. We also want to look at the fact that it's one that tends to overgrow or choke out more desirable plants. That vigorous growth, can anybody say kudzu? Lord have mercy. And the definition goes on, could be tobacco products or weed. When I was growing up, another word for that was Mary Jane, marijuana. Number 2, now we're refined when we talk about it. Now we call it cannabis. Cannabis. I said, no, not. It's weed. You ought not to be smoking it because then you slow down and then you get apathetic. God bless you. An obnoxious growth, a thing or a person. You realize that's another definition. An obnoxious growth or a thing, or it could even be a person. Another way of looking at it when it comes to spiritual weeds is an appearing acceptable in one place, yet it's damaging in another. What appears to be acceptable in one place, but could actually be damaging in another. You know, sex is a beautiful thing. It's a good thing. God gave us the gift of sex. And God intended this to be enjoyed in a covenant relationship between a man and a woman. But if sex is practiced outside of that covenant relationship, if it's practiced with multiple partners, if it's practiced with no sense of boundaries and no sense of commitment to a higher standard of living and loving and valuing people, then that which is good in another place becomes a weed. And it can choke the life out of any relationship.